Hey there, it's Jody. I host the show that you're listening to right now, which has been going for 5 years and is gearing up for its biggest year ever next year as we head towards America 250. And I'm here to tell you that we are only able to do this and grow and be ambitious at a time when public media and radio and podcasting are in a really tough spot. We've only been able to do this because we are part of the Radiotopia community. And more specifically, because listeners to this show and other shows in the Radiotopia collective have stepped up to become members and supported Radiotopia directly. Being a part of Radiotopia means not just that we get some support from Radiotopia, but also that we are in community with other hosts and shows who I deeply respect and admire, like Nate DeMeo of The Memory Palace, Rishi Hirway of Song Exploder, the great Avery Trufelman of Articles of Interest, not to mention all the new incredible shows like Try Hard and Proxy. These are some of the best radio makers in the world, and we're all in it together. This community spirit also extends to the fundraiser itself. We split the money that is raised during our annual fundraiser, which is where you come in. Your generous gifts don't just support our team, but they cast a vote for this kind of media. Independent, plucky, ambitious, which, by the way, is how I describe you. Yeah, you. Independent, plucky, ambitious. Doesn't that sound nice? It would mean so much if you invest in our community of creators by making your tax-deductible donation very easy at our website, thisdaypod.com. And two more important things. As a bonus, when you donate before the end of the year, December 31st, your gift is going to be matched by a generous PRX donor. So double your impact right now. Also, when you donate, you will be invited to our holiday mixtope on December 4th, where all the producers, we're all going to get together and share these little audio love letters to each other, and you'll be able to listen in and join in on the community. It's going to be a really great event. We're very excited to try it, but it only works if a bunch of people like you contribute and join in. So head over to thisdaypod.com. You will see a link right there. That's thisdaypod.com to support Radiotopia. You are a huge part of this community. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This day is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations. Hey there, Jody Avirgan here. Happy Thanksgiving from everyone here at This Day. We are giving ourselves a little bit of a break here on the show and bringing you some Thanksgiving-y episodes from the archives. So I'm not sure when you're listening to this, before or after your meal, but there is a good chance that you had turkey for Thanksgiving this year, which is fine. Turkey's okay. I like it. I will say, though, Kellie and I were chatting a couple weeks ago and realized that both of our families have transitioned over the last couple years to fish as the main dish on Thanksgiving. I think turkey's just really hard to do right. It's pretty easy to screw up. And honestly, a fish fry or a baked salmon is way, way better, in my opinion. But there is an even more alternate universe in which Americans are gathering around the Thanksgiving table, and it's not turkey, it's not fish, it is hippo. Yes, 100 and change years ago, there was a big push to make hippo meat something that would regularly appear on American plates. This was an idea that came about for reasons legit and reasons kind of baffling, and it's an idea that never took hold for reasons that I think are pretty obvious. But anyway, this is a great Thanksgiving what if. Here is our episode on hippos with the great Dan Pashman of the Sporkful, and no matter what is on your plate, thanks for listening. Happy Thanksgiving, and we will see you soon. Hello, and welcome to This Day in Esoteric Political History from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avirgan. This day, April 1910, newspapers across the country are hailing the latest food trend to sweep the country, hippo meat. All right, it may not have exactly been a trend and it may not have been sweeping, but it was in this moment that there was a serious meat crisis in the United States, as well as a growing ecological crisis, and American lawmakers were considering a novel approach to solving both, growing hippos in the United States South for consumption. There was a proposal to allocate about $250,000 to go to Africa, grab some hippos, bring them back to the swamps of Louisiana, let them thrive, and then kill them and eat them. Problem solved. Now, of course, if we cut to 100 years later, you've probably noticed that this plan didn't really stick. But it is worth discussing why lawmakers were so desperate to find a new meat source and why our taste in food can be so reluctant to change. So here, as always, are Nicole Hemmer of Vanderbilt and Kellie Carter-Jackson of Wellesley. Hello there.
Hello, Jody.
Hey there.
And our special guest for this episode, who else would we have on but Dan Pashman, host of the Sporkful, the legendary food podcast, overall brilliant food thinker. Dan, thank you for coming on.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me.
And I forgot to include your biggest accolade as of late, inventor of a new pasta shape, which maybe we can talk about that towards the end, but that is kind of your world now.
Yeah, it's, I'm in the pasta thing, I guess.
But Dan's Cascatelli is available everywhere, and he did an amazing series of episodes about inventing a new pasta shape. But let's talk about hippo meat. Dan, anyone who listens to your show, I've known you for a long time and listened to your show, knows that you are an adventurous eater. I have to ask the question, have you tried it?
I have not.
Okay.
I have not. I think that probably meat-wise, the closest thing I could say that I've gotten is that I did once eat colt, which is horse, in Europe, where it's legal, and I suspect that that's the closest thing I've gotten.
And we'll get into the history, but you said where it's legal. Hippo meat, as far as we can tell right now, is illegal, right, Dan? I think you and I were texting about this a little bit. It was like,
yes, it's illegal in America. That's right, and in a lot of places because it's not quite an endangered species, but it's whatever the one level short of that is. So
I think it's called the Do Not Eat list.
Yeah.
So for this historical story, Niki, Kellie, I'm curious. I mentioned that the imperative here was there was a food crisis and that there was an ecological crisis or incentive. So maybe we should take those one by one. What is the sort of larger food context that led to people starting to get creative, I guess, in terms of trying to find new meat sources?
The United States was undergoing some pretty dramatic changes in terms of land and population in the early 20th century. Much of the late 19th century had been kind of defined by overhunting. You'll see those images of giant piles of buffalo skulls and really sort of using up resources in a lot of ways. And this included various meat sources in the United States. And it was happening at the very same time that urbanization and immigration were driving new demands for meat as well. So you have this diminishing set of resources, you have this growing population, and you have a culture, especially in the era of Teddy Roosevelt, that is increasingly obsessed and anxious about masculinity and meat as kind of a form of expressing masculinity.
Good thing we don't have that problem anymore.
Yeah. I know. I'm so glad we solved it. Thank goodness. Toxic masculinity went away when we got enough meat.
Check.
I know. I mean, it's also a sort of an existential crisis, right? Because it's the end of the frontier or the closing of the frontier. And so now this idea of like where to go next, what to conquer next, what to eat next becomes a real question, especially when we think about, land shortages and where we would get a new meat supply and what spaces would be ideal for that meat supply. Thinking about hippos and the swamp. I mean, the fact that someone's thinking about it, we've got swampland in Louisiana. This is perfect. But I mean, it's another way of using a land source that people thought pretty difficult, if not impossible, to use.
And if you're running out of grazing space, you turn to the kind of these other landscapes and think about how you can use them. And that's where this idea of, well, hippos like water, so maybe that's one way to solve this problem.
Hippos have meat.
Meanwhile, I'm from New Jersey. We have swamps in New Jersey. We could have gotten the hippos in Jersey. That would have been that would have mixed things up.
I suspect those hippos would not have loved the snow, though I guess they weren't going to be long for this world anyway.
Right.
But Niki, your point about the kind of machismo at the heart of this is interesting in that when you look at the proposal that was made in Congress, and they were trying to, as I mentioned, allocate $250,000 for this plan. It was a Louisiana senator. If you look at the sort of blue ribbon commission that he put together for this, they were all like big game hunters and like macho men. And there weren't any like nutritional experts, right? Or like people who know about the food supply. It was all about like, yeah, we've hunted big game before and we can do that here. Whereas in fact, this is a much subtler problem. And it was trying to, in theory, it was trying to solve a much more systemic problem.
Yeah, the two of them were very much linked because we're talking about a time that's like 20 years after Frederick Jackson Turner had said that the frontier had disappeared. And that was supposed to be the space where you were going to demonstrate your manhood by going out to the frontier and taming the wild lands. And so you have people like Teddy Roosevelt who after that moment are going not just out west, but over to places like Africa. Roosevelt was a big game hunter as well. And so it's the combination of all of those things. Like maybe we can solve these problems, not just the meat food supply problem, but taming these big game African creatures here in the U.S.
I have a question. Like the logistics of this. Like, how do you go over to Africa? I'm not sure what country they were thinking about at this point. Let's just say Botswana. How do you go over to Botswana, load up ships, a very heavy hippopotamus? Are you bringing over, 6 men, 6 women? I feel like Noah's Ark. I don't know. Like, how are you doing this? How are you keeping them alive on the voyage that it would take several weeks or so to bring them over? None of this sounds like a good idea. Like, none of it. It sounds expensive. It sounds lofty.
It's not a great plan. There's a reason why we don't have hippos,
Right.
because even if you solve the shipping problem, then you bring them to the United States. And one of the things that they were arguing was that water hyacinth was getting into all of the swamps in Louisiana, and the hippos would help solve that. But introducing all of these exotic invasive species into the American South was not going to go well. If those hippos survived, there's a good chance they were going to become kind of the king fauna of the region, and you were going to have a big old hippo problem.
I mean, there's a reason why like so many sci-fi movies and all kinds of movies involve like humans thinking they're going to fix a problem by altering nature.
Yeah.
And and like
Jurassic Park, anyone?
Right, there's always some sort of like horrendous unintended consequence. Like it never just goes exactly as planned.
Well, and especially in this case, if part of the imperative was to solve an acute hunger crisis, it's going to take generations for those 10 hippos you bring over to reproduce to get to scale, right? And to sort of like eat into, so to speak, the cattle industry.
Well, and think of the crisis they're having now in certain parts of the American South with feral pigs, feral hogs. Imagine it's feral hippos and how challenging that problem would be.
So, Dan, what is your sense? If we take a step back and we kind of look at, you hinted at it a little bit, but do you have a sense of what hippo meat tastes like? And, I think part of the argument here was not just the logistics that Kellie was pointing out of how hard it would be to bring over, but also like, can we shift American taste to the point where they would be willing to eat hippo when they're used to eating cow?
Right. I mean, look, I as I said, I haven't tasted hippo. Based on my rudimentary Google searching, the internet tells me that the taste is mild, less than lamb, more than beef, maybe more marbled than venison. I don't know. In my experience, I feel like people want to. Maybe I'm just not the most refined taster. Mm-hmm. I feel like people want to think that like every meat is so radically different from every other meat and has its own unique flavor. And maybe if I was highly trained in the field of tasting and had put a lot of focus on it, I would taste those differences. Like to me, like you put enough sauce on it, like yes, of course, chicken and steak aren't the same thing, but like if you're gonna tell me it's kind of like less flavorful than lamb, more flavorful than beef, fattier than venison, like okay, I get it. It's kind of in the hoofed animal genre. Yeah. I'm sure.
I'm now imagining like a meat sommelier.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Going through and testing all of these.
But like honestly, I would suspect that if you put enough seasoning on it and fed it to people and didn't tell them what they were eating, 90-something% of people wouldn't even know it was something they hadn't eaten before. It's probably not all that radical. It's probably honestly like delicious if it doesn't bother you to eat it. And if it's cooked well and all those things. So I would.
Well,
try
that's
it.
another sort of thing that I'm curious to hear your thoughts on, which is, how much of our taste is about the framing and the expectation, and if it's called one thing versus called something else, or if it's just different from the thing we're used to. How much do you see that in this story as well?
Oh, I mean, that's all of our ideas about which animals are delicious and which animals are weird or ethically wrong or gross to eat make no sense. They're all contradictory. It all depends on where you grew up and what you grew up eating. The idea that people would eat chicken and beef and pork but think that eating horse is so awful makes no logical sense. If you're going to say I'm not going to eat any animals, okay, at least you're logically consistent. And environment expectation has a lot to do with it. Environment has a lot to do with it. There's a researcher in the UK named Charles Spence who's done a ton of research all about all of the hidden factors that affect taste perception. Things like the lighting, the music, the size and shape and color of the plates. If the music at playing in a restaurant matches the culture of the cuisine that you're eating, people will rate the food as more authentic. Whereas, if you go to an Indian restaurant and they're playing Frank Sinatra, people will rate the food as less authentic, regardless of what it actually tastes like.
Wow.
There's a million more studies like that.
One of my favorite restaurants ever, I will just say, it was a sushi restaurant that always played bossa nova, and I thought it was the best thing in the world. There was two amazing cultures were there, but I was I don't know, to me that was great. It made the sushi taste better. But anyway.
But did you find the sushi less authentic?
Maybe, I don't know.
A lot of short daily news podcasts focus on just one story. But right now, you probably need more. On Up First from NPR, we bring you 3 of the world's top headlines every day in under 15 minutes. Because no one story can capture all that's happening in this big, crazy world of ours on any given morning. Listen now to the Up First podcast from NPR.
This day is brought to you by Quince. Look, you have heard me talk about all the amazing luxury clothing you can get at fair prices from Quince. I'm wearing my very own cable knit sweater right now as I record this. In many parts of the country, the weather is turning colder. It is time to get cozy with sweaters and jackets and Italian wool coats. You can get all of that for great prices on Quince. But can I also direct your attention to a section on their website called Home? That's right, it is not just clothing. And if you want to get cozy, how about a cashmere blanket throw for just $129? There are pillows, blankets, sheets, towels, linens. Quince has it all. You can upgrade your look and your home or apartment. It's time to step into the holiday season with layers made to feel good, look polished, and last. All from Quince. Perfect for gifting or keeping for yourself. Go to quince.com/thisday for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/thisday to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/thisday.
My husband's family, they're big hunters, and we would take deer meat and we would grind it up, and I made lasagna with it one time, and we had people over for dinner. And my friend, as he's getting his second helping, is like, oh my gosh, this is so good. Let me tell you though, I can't stand venison. And he was saying how much he hated it.
Right.
And I was like, oh, I'm not about to tell him he's eating it. But I think it does play into, if you're eating lasagna, you are programmed to think this is lasagna, this is beef, or whatever. You're not necessarily thinking of venison or some other meat substitute. But then it's funny because once you hear it or once you find out what it is, all of a sudden it's suddenly gross.
Right.
My only big addition to the conversation is that when I lived in Sydney, I ate kangaroo, which felt a little verboten because it's they're so cute and they're a kind of charismatic megafauna. But in Australia, they're kind of just like deer. Right. They're kind of annoying. People hit them with their cars. You have to watch out for them when you're out driving. And so it has that same kind of venison-like quality to them, I think.
So coming back to this hippo story, one of the big, in addition to just being a sort of strange little moment, it also does present a turning point in the sense that there was a real need to find kind of a new food supply and to think about kind of where are huge animals going to graze and live. And this is one of those moments where it does seem like the Department of Agriculture, in the wake of this, kind of doubles down and says, the way we're going to improve our meat supply is to not diversify the number of animals that we eat, but find more land to graze beef. And, Dan, you think about sort of the impact of food and agricultural policy on our history. I mean, that is a hugely consequential decision and sort of stance, right?
100%. Although I have to say, like, as the population increases and you need to feed more people and feed them more and more efficiently, it's going to have negative environmental effects and perhaps negative effects on health based on the compromises you're making to increase the efficiency of the food production system. Would it be any different if we had a diverse set of animals that we were doing that with? Maybe not. There's still the basic math of, like, you only have so much land and you have more and more mouths to feed. And so to do that to do that efficiently, you're going to have to make compromises.
Yeah, maybe they'd be clearing forests to make room for swamps, artificial swamps to raise hippopotamuses.
100%. And there'd be some other negative environmental impact. I mean, to me, honestly, like, what's interesting to me is this sounds a lot like the lab-grown meat stuff we're hearing about today, where you hear about, like, there's environmental issues, the animals are a problem, we need to use science or technology or research, we need new ideas to fix this problem. And so you have lab-grown meat and or, the impossible beyond meat sector where they're trying to use science and research to come up with something that hopefully will be a positive impact, but won't fix all the problems and may create other problems.
Yeah.
I do think it's interesting, though, that the question of, well, is meat required? Do you know what I mean? Like, I think that instead of saying, like, what other meat source can we find, like, maybe doubling down on saying, like, well, why don't we just expand to more vegetables and grains and, like, things of that nature. What else is hearty? If it's about feeling full, like, cornmeal will do that, like, or grains and things of that nature. So I don't know that this would have been the moment to completely shift the American diet, but it does beg, I think, some interesting questions about why we think meat is required. Certainly for dinner, maybe not breakfast or lunch, but certainly for dinner. My kids are like, where's the meat? Like, there's no meat on the plate. Right. They don't consider that, like, dinner. So how we think about what is a meal or what should go in a meal, I think, is important too.
Absolutely. That there are cultural expectations, and those are very difficult to change. I think it's interesting. You're starting to see changes happening around that in some places in the U.S. now. It strikes me just on anecdotal evidence that a lot of people are not necessarily changing because they have a changing ethics around eating animals, but that they're persuaded by climate evidence that they need to change their diets to a less meat-based diet. And it'll be interesting to see if those kind of ethical, scientific, political questions actually have a sustained effect on the U.S. diet over time.
I mean, we've seen it in Brazil, and the ways that they have cut into the Amazon in order to create additional farming for cows and for meat. There are really intense consequences, I think, that have to be considered outside of just the I won't call it superficial, but, like, outside the cost of it, outside of, like, just relocating and all of that.
Yeah, I mean, one of my best friends, my buddy Tom, whose nickname when he was in his 20s was the Caveman, because he was very carnivorous and liked to eat large quantities of food, but is also a smart, thoughtful guy who has read more about the climate change issue and the effect of animals, is ready, basically eats a tenth of the amount of meat that he used to eat. So I see him as sort of a case study. On the other hand, I think, like, it's always going to, it's a very slow change because you're still bumping up against the same issues you talked about at the top of the sort of the machismo around meat eating, like, come on, Kellie, now we're going to have a head of lettuce at Thanksgiving dinner? That's not how Americans celebrate. I mean, did you see what happened a couple months ago with the gas stoves? There was a brief discussion that because there is increasing evidence that gas stoves are not great for you. And I mean, like, you're basically just burning gas in your house. It's surprising it took us this long to realize it might be, an issue. And so, there was like someone in the Biden administration said something very briefly, like sort of spoke out of turn and said, like, we might someday have to ban gas stoves. And, Ron DeSantis and all these Republicans jumped on it like, out of my cold, dead hands will you take our gas stoves.
I want to cook meat over fire, right?
As if Ron DeSantis cooks anything. And as it also in Florida, they almost entirely have electric stoves. But there, they don't even have gas in Florida. But whatever.
But Dan, I mean, as we wrap up, I'm curious we've started to talk about it, but I'm curious about this larger question of taste and how tastes change. And how much have you noticed that new things really do work their way into our tastes? Is it because of good marketing? Can someone kind of like will their way to changing American taste? Or is it because of big, events like, in this case, a food shortage or a pandemic or something like that? I mean, what actually leads to fundamental shifts in taste?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think it happens slowly. We did an episode of the Sporkful years ago at Picky Eaters. They talked about how, it's very common for a person to have to taste something 30 or 40 times before they acquire a taste for it. I mean, I was well into my mid-30s before I could bite straight into a tomato. So it takes a long time for people to acquire certain tastes, especially if they didn't have them when they were young. Can you market your way into taste? A little bit, probably, but I think it's more just a matter of exposure over time. Taste certainly changed, though. To me, I think the number one contributing factor is, well, beyond necessity, which certainly is one, there's migration. Human beings move around the world and bring our ingredients and dishes with us. The food in America is so much more spicy now than it was when I was a kid. Look at all the different lines of spicy Doritos, spicy snack foods that are everywhere. My kids eat a much broader range of dishes and cuisines and spices than I did when I was growing up, and so do I. And that's just from the country becoming more diverse and foods crossing boundaries and crossing neighborhoods and intermixing and new ideas. And what was once foreign becomes familiar over time.
I think about this having grown up in kind of rural southern Indiana. I don't think I'd seen an avocado until I was in my late teens or 20s. And now they're kind of ubiquitous. And part of it is marketing and part of it is changing markets and changing cultural foodways. But it has changed, I think, in all of our lifetimes in different ways, depending on where we grew up.
Look at sushi. In the 1980s, large swaths of the American population thought sushi was gross. They thought that the idea of eating raw fish with vinegared rice was, quote-unquote, weird, exotic, foreign, and not something that they wanted to have any part of. And now you can walk into almost any supermarket in America, and they have sushi there. It's become a staple.
Yeah, I mean, this was probably a generation ago now, but, there was that moment where salsa surpassed ketchup as the number one condiment in the United States. So, yeah, this stuff does change in our lifetimes.
But I don't think we're going to get to hippos yet.
I don't know if we're going to get to hippos.
Well, Kellie, you just got to eat it 30 or 40 times. You'll get the hang of it, okay? Put it in some lasagna.
Maybe Chick-fil-A will have its eat more hippo sign.
As we wrap up, I mean, there was a lot more meat on this bone, as they say. There's a lot more to the hippo story. We should also give a shout out to John Mooallem, fantastic writer who for a long time wrote, just brilliant weird animal stories, and he wrote a big long story for The Atavist about this sort of hippo craze in the 1910s, including this one character, Frederick Russell Burnham, who's like one of the most fascinating characters. We'll find an excuse to do an episode about him. And then some people might be listening and know that there's a Pablo Escobar connection here too, which is Pablo Escobar had some pet hippos, and then when his land got seized, authorities didn't know what to do with his hippos, and I guess they didn't think to kill it for meat. They just let him sort of run wild, and now there's like 50 feral hippos running around on this island, I think. Anyway, so that's
I smell a Cocaine Bear sequel.
Yes, there it is. I think that's exactly right. There you go. Wait, is it hippos that are the most dangerous animal? Is that right? Is it hippos?
Yeah, they're savage. Yeah,
they kill more. They kill more people than any other animal in Africa because they just move fast and they can't see, and people light fires and they just sprint over them. But anyway, that's for another time, I suppose. All right, Dan Pashman, this has been really, really fun, and I'll give you another little nod to the pasta here. You want to tell people about the pasta real quick and where they can find it?
Yeah, so the pasta shape is called cascatelli. It's designed to be great to sink your teeth into and hold a ton of sauce. It's in a bunch of stores all around America. It's made by a company called Sfolini, Sfoglini, and you can also just order it right to your door through Sfolini's website.
And I'll just say Dan's whole series on developing a new pasta shape was one of my favorite things ever, because you did journalism and and then you actually converted it to the real world and actually started making the thing, as opposed to just talking about different pasta shapes and so forth. So it was very cool.
I appreciate it. That one's still up in the Sporkful podcast feed. It's called Mission Impossible, that series.
Love it.
Of course it is. Of course it is. All right. Nicole Hemmer, thanks to you as always.
Thanks, Jody.
And Kellie Carter-Jackson, thanks to you.
My pleasure.
Thanks for listening. Our researcher and producer is Jacob Feldman. Our producer is Brittany Brown. Our transcripts, which you can find on our website, are done by Kala Nakua. This Day in Esoteric Political History is a proud member of Radiotopia from PRX, a network of independent, creator-owned, listener-supported podcasts. Audrey Mardovich, executive producer. Yuri Lasordo, director of operations. Thanks to all of you who support this show by being members of Radiotopia. Find transcripts, sign up for our newsletter, find us on social, suggest topics, all that and more at our website, thisdaypod.com. See you soon.
Radiotopia. From